Hello there, my name's Lizzie and I'm autistic. Well, that's a sentence I wasn't sure I'd ever say, to be honest, but thankfully I had a diagnosis a couple of weeks ago as being ASD, or on the autism spectrum, and it feels really strange, but simultaneously it feels kind of really right, really. So I thought I'd basically document my journey into this brave new world of being an autistic person through my new YouTube channel. In case you're wondering, my background is full of little models, and it's because I'm a clay artist and illustrator, and I have another channel called Clay Disarray, and I'll leave that down below if you want to check that out. So apologies if it's a bit distracting, but yeah, it's the kind of only space I've got really to make videos really, so hopefully you can bear with me on that. So I thought I was autistic for a number of years now, maybe around 20 years, and I remember specifically sitting in an office job, and me and some colleagues had come across the AQ50 test, and we were all completing that in our lunch hour or whatever, and I was astonished that my score was way higher than anybody else's. So that was the first time I'd ever had an inkling of maybe being autistic. But I remember thinking at the same time, well, nobody's ever pointed it out to me. There's never been a health professional or a doctor that's told me I'm autistic. So chances are I'm not. I'm just obviously a bit odd or something. Maybe a bit kind of socially awkward, you know, all the things that we tend to be really. I just thought I can't be, and you know, I just put it to the back of my mind for a number of years, and it was around 5 years ago I basically started having some issues with my immune system. I don't know if you've heard of MCAS, or mast cell activation syndrome, but I strongly suspect I have it, and I've actually got an appointment with a specialist later this week. So hopefully I can get a diagnosis of that, if you know, if that is actually the case. But basically I started kind of reacting to a whole load of stuff, and it's commonplace with MCAS. So I was reacting to foods, various smells, chemicals, and more recently I've started reacting to kind of exercise and temperatures. So it's really kind of an all-consuming kind of illness really. But through that I was doing, you know, an awful lot of research on MCAS. It became my special interest for a while, and still is, and I discovered that a lot of autistic people will struggle with immune system disorders at some point. So, you know, it got me thinking again, is this because or related to being autistic? So because I'm an artist, I know a lot of artists and illustrators online, and I noticed maybe 2 or 3 years ago that a few of them that I know or am acquaintances with were revealing their own autism diagnoses, or sometimes combined with ADHD as well. And it got me thinking, you know, this is something that I'd be really interested in finding out for sure, you know, if I am actually autistic. So I spoke to one of them, Tim, who kindly told me about the NHS right to choose pathway. So it takes the pressure off the patient in, you know, trying to go to their GP and say, here's all my symptoms, because it's very strange describing just the way you are as symptoms for one. So yeah, it just allows a person to, you know, say to their GP, this is what I want to do, can you just refer me? And it's supposed to take, you know, the pressure off the patient in doing so. So thankfully my GP was fine. In fact, he hardly spoke about it. He just wanted to ensure that I had the right paperwork, and just, you know, sent me on my way. And, you know, it was a huge relief, because it's really hard to talk about your GP, or it's really hard to talk to your GP about anything. And particularly if you've had, history of illness, that is really hard to kind of pinpoint, because, I just get the feeling that they think everything's in my head. But yeah, thankfully that went fine, and I heard back pretty soon afterwards and was advised to fill out a load of forms. My partner had to fill out a form, and because I'm older, my parents aren't around anymore. They died kind of years ago, and I lead quite an insular life, so it was really just myself and Ian that completed the forms. So I thought that in itself would be really difficult, because I would imagine that they'd need a whole lot of evidence from a whole lot of people to be able to offer a diagnosis. So I was really relieved that it was just the two in my case. So it took me ages to complete the forms, I have to say. I'm kind of avoidant with, stuff that I have to do that's really important. I find it kind of quite difficult to do in the moment. So it took me, quite a number of months to complete the form. And at which point I realised that Ian had to complete a form as well. So there was a bit of a time delay on that. But all in all, it took me around a year. And I had my final kind of face-to-face assessment, albeit online, a couple of weeks ago. And I was just, it was really hard. I was dreading it. I was, for a good solid 2 weeks beforehand, it was all I could think about. And I think I got myself into such a state that I just was prepared to hear, a big fat no on the day. It's, you're not autistic, you're just odd or something. But the psychologist that I spoke to was, really great. She was obviously very, very experienced in her role and dealing with lots of nervous autistic people. And it was a really emotional experience. I was with her for about an hour and a half, and she offered a diagnosis actually at the end of the session, which I was really surprised about. I thought she'd have to go away and, look at all of her notes, etc. But obviously it was quite obvious for her. So it was quite overwhelming, I have to say. I don't know how I could have prepared myself for that moment, because I just cried, really. It was all that I could think to do. It was validation, but yet there was a sadness to it, because I just thought, gosh, I'm 49 and here I am now finding out I'm autistic. And I think that was another reason why I wanted to start documenting all this online, because I've obviously been looking at a number of videos about people that have been late diagnosed as autistic, but there's quite a lot of people in their 20s and 30s, and obviously that's still, a huge challenge for them to find out something so intrinsic to their whole self, really, so late in life. But for me at 49, I just found that there were kind of fewer videos around, or certainly that I could find, really. So I thought I'd give a little representation to those that are a bit older still, really. For those in their 40s and 50s, just a very difficult thing to be confronted with, I think. So I think in terms of how I knew I was autistic, for me it's definitely kind of social stuff and sensory issues, although I did meet a lot of the criteria in different areas for the psychologist. But I've always struggled socially, and that the whole thing about eye contact was really difficult for me when I was young. My mum died when I was 12, and she died a year into me going to high school. And I remember, obviously I was going through a major kind of depressive episode at that point. But I remember some girls at high school made the comment that, I was always looking down at their chests, and that was really odd. Was I a lesbian, or all sorts of stuff like that? And for one, I just thought, gosh, I hadn't even noticed that I wasn't making eye contact, and I didn't understand how the term lesbian was kind of disparaging either. I just thought, well, I don't think I am, but this feels really weird. I don't really understand any of this. But obviously, in hindsight, I realised that I was having some real issues with eye contact. So because I was kind of high masking at that point, and masking, if you weren't aware, means that basically you're trying to appear as neurotypical to the world as you possibly can. So you learn a lot by observing others and, you know, absorbing their habits and their traits, and yeah, just, you know, anything you can really to try and give the impression of being a normie, basically. So I realised at that point that I needed to try and, you know, start making eye contact with people, but it's something that I've kind of always struggled with, and I don't think many people would have realised really, because I think actually I give quite good eye contacts because I've just forced myself into doing it. But I've always noticed that if I have to make eye contact with somebody for any prolonged period of time, that my eyesight gets quite kind of strange. I can only kind of gaze at somebody's eyes for a kind of short period of time really before my eyes start wanting to kind of look at one eye and then the other eye and thinking, can they see that I'm looking at one eye, and jumping between the two, by which point I have no idea what that person's saying because I'm so focused on trying to give the impression of, you know, holding normal eye contact that is, yeah, really difficult. And alongside that, I've you know, always struggled socially. I've relied on alcohol hugely throughout all of my life, but because now of my intolerances, and I, you know, I've got a gallbladder issue as well, I can't drink alcohol now. So the thought of socialising would, you know, fill me with complete dread really. So yeah, I just don't tend to do it now. And also I've had huge kind of sensory issues throughout my life. So I'm really light sensitive, so I wear sunglasses all the time. I also can't stand loud noise, you know, all the kind of stereotypical stuff really. I'm fine if I'm making the loud noise, of course, but if somebody else is, like for instance, if Ian will kind of scrape a plate or, you know, drop some crockery or cutlery in the kitchen, I'll, you know, have a freak out because it's painful, and you know, I don't know how best to describe that to somebody that doesn't suffer noise sensitivity, but it really does feel painful. And you know, on top of that, with textures, different clothes, you know, I can't stand anything around my neck. I've always had major issues about that. So you know, there's all sorts of stuff that I'll, you know, hopefully be able to share with you as time goes on, really. Yeah, basically my plan is just to keep going with this channel until I've got nothing else to say about autism. But I, you know, I imagine that there's a whole lot to say, and particularly being a woman in perimenopause as well. I know that there's again, you know, added complications of the two kind of together really. I've had a hellish time in perimenopause, and I do wonder now if it's because it's of the whole autistic experience that I find changes to my body, you know, through hormonal change more challenging than the average woman. It's, you know, really hard to say, isn't it? I've no experience of being a neurotypical person, so yeah, it's hard. So I'm planning to do one video a week, obviously with the different discussion points each week. So by all means, let me know if you have a question about being a late diagnosed autistic person. And what I should mention is that, you know, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Each person's experience of autism is as individual as their own fingerprints. So obviously I'll be giving you just my interpretation of my own life as an autistic person, but you know, other people's perspectives could be completely different really. So yeah, if you'd like to see more, by all means go and hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.